Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The government is now shut down for the first time since, well, the previous Trump administration. And if you listen to the Trump administration today, this is entirely and completely the Democrats' fault. They're running a PR campaign to convince everyone, incorrectly I'd say, that the Dems are solely to blame for this shutdown.
The reason your government is shut down at this very minute is because, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of congressional Republicans and even a few moderate Democrats supported opening the government, the Chuck Schumer AOC wing of the Democratic Party shut down the government.
Democrats in Congress have officially shut down the United States government. House Republicans passed a nonpartisan, clean piece of legislation to extend current government funding until November 21st. But nearly every single Democrat senator voted against this bill. Sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do, and it's because the Democrats have put us into this position. If the Democrats did not vote to shut down the government, we would not be standing up here talking about layoffs today.
They've also plastered that same sentiment across a bunch of government websites in what looks like a violation of government ethics rules, although, God, those are long gone. They're really weird messages, by the way, if you happen to check them out. But here's what I would say about this argument. It doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about how this administration has conducted itself over the last 9 months. Donald Trump is governing like the dictator of America, right? He promised to be a dictator on day one, his words. He's compared himself to America's king, even to the Pope. The goal of the second term, quite clearly, and it's not hiding this, is to assert complete control over every aspect of the federal government. He wants to directly control who gets fired and hired across the entire government and even civil society, from Fed directors to talk show hosts. He wants to directly control who gets indicted, most recently with the ridiculous prosecution of James Comey. He says, right now, the position of the Trump administration and Donald Trump is that he, by himself, unilaterally, can raise taxes on the American people by $1 trillion entirely by executive fiat, just by being like, yeah, taxes up. He says he can rescind or reallocate any congressionally appropriated funds basically at any time entirely by executive fiat. Oh, there's a bill to spend stuff there? No, we're not going to do it. Okay, but think of all that. But now it's the Democrats who are in the driver's seat when it comes to shutting down the government. That is a pretty tough sell, especially considering Trump is using the shutdown to, drumroll, govern like a king. Just today, Russell Vought, the top Trump official responsible for implementing this kind of unitary executive agenda, right? All power flows from the president, announced that more than $8 billion in federal funding, again, appropriated funding, legally appropriated exclusively for blue states, would be frozen or canceled. That includes transportation infrastructure spending here in New York, climate infrastructure spending in more than a dozen other states, including California, Washington, New Jersey, but only states that didn't vote for Donald Trump. Now, there's a lot still unclear about what specifically he's referring to, but presumably this is congressionally appropriated money. It's passed into law, right? And it's the money that's appropriated. But again, the Trump administration's clawing it back, citing DEI, like there's too much DEI in the tunnel they're building across the Hudson River and the Green New scam. Russell Vought's also going to use the shutdown as an excuse to fire even more federal workers. But he's been doing that. They've been doing that in an extension of the reckless DOGE cuts this administration unilaterally enacted earlier this year. The president is excited to do what he calls bad things that are irreversible.
So the last person that wants to shut down is us. Now, with that being said, we can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible, that are bad for them and irreversible by them, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things that they like, cutting programs that they like. And you all know Russell Vought. He's become very popular recently because he can trim the budget to a level that you couldn't do any other way.
We're doing well as a country, so the last thing we want to do is shut it down. But a lot of good can come down from shutdowns. We can get rid of a lot of things that we didn't want, and they'd be Democrat things.
So a lot of good can come from the shutdown. It will hurt Democrats. It's Democrats that are shutting the government down. And speaking of DOGE, there's also the Trump-backed bailout of the administration's kooky far-right buddy in Argentina, this guy. The administration is just giving him a $20 billion bailout line to help his struggling, possibly approaching crisis economy because he did all these sort of right-wing reforms ahead of Argentina's upcoming election. They've even said it's like a bridge to get him over the election. Now, Democrats in Congress don't get a say in that. Just, again, $20 billion, whoop. All that being done without any outside input. But the Democrats are the ones responsible for shutting the federal government down. And I will say, it doesn't appear from the polling that people are really buying it. New polling indicates more Americans are blaming the Republicans for the shutdown than the Democrats. And I think it's because it is obvious to anyone paying attention that Trump is running the show, right? As terrible that may be. He wants you to think that. He doesn't want to think the government's controlled by Democrats. Yesterday, Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean confronted Speaker Mike Johnson in front of the cameras and said what a lot of people are thinking, that Donald Trump is unwell.
The president is unhinged. He is unwell. What are you doing?
A lot of folks on your side are too. I don't control.
Oh my God, please. That performance in front of the generals, that
I didn't see it.
is so dangerous. You know I serve on Foreign Affairs and Appropriations. This is a collision of those two things. Our allies are looking elsewhere. Our enemies are laughing.
I just left
you
the
have a
Speaker's
president
side.
who is unwell.
Claire McCaskill is former Democratic Senator in Missouri. Brendan Buck worked in communications for House Speaker John Boehner and Paul Ryan. They both have experiences with government shutdowns, and they join me now. Claire, what do you think about where we are, the sort of spin today about who gets blamed for it?
Well, listen, the Democrats have a lot of work to do here. The message is not complicated. They won't negotiate to save your health care. And by the way, there's two things that are different about this shutdown that have never occurred before in a shutdown. The first one is that the folks in charge of government will not negotiate. That never happened before. That never happened before. There was always negotiation going on. And by the way, at a minimum, they would show up at least to negotiate. I mean, Johnson doesn't even want them in the Capitol because he's afraid, frankly, probably of the Epstein vote. And then the second thing that's different here is never before have tax dollars been used to politicize a shutdown. You can go on every website and you can see the language is being used that is a blatant violation of the Hatch Act. Rhetoric being used with tax dollars on government websites. I mean, this has never, ever happened before under a Republican president or a Democratic president. So this is a much different kind of shutdown. And by the way, I have a friend who told me that her sister, who's a member of a Coast Guard family. Coast Guard families were in food lines today, knowing they won't get paid in October. ICE will get paid because they got all that money in the big ugly bill, but the Coast Guard won't get paid. So he's demonizing federal workers, many of whom are sacrificing greatly to serve their country. And I just pray the Democrats get aggressive and stay on message. This is about health care versus tax cuts for billionaires. If they do that, the government will begin to shut down. It will impact the economy. And I do think the Republicans will have to negotiate.